Living in our small town nestled among the pines was both a blessing and a curse. Everyone knew everyone, and the community was tight-knit. Sarah and I had been married for 10 years, and our lives revolved around our 8-year-old daughter, Emma. I was Mark, the town firefighter, often hailed as a local hero. My job was demanding, and I frequently missed family events, which left Sarah feeling increasingly lonely. Despite the challenges, I believed our marriage was strong, built on a solid foundation of love and mutual respect. Sarah was a high school teacher, adored by her students for her kindness and dedication. Her best friend and colleague, Jessica, often joked that Sarah had a heart too big for one person. Jessica had always been intuitive, and lately, she had started noticing changes in Sarah's behavior. Though Sarah had always been full of life, she seemed distant and distracted over the past few months. The changes in Sarah started subtly. She began working out at a new gym that had recently opened in town. At first, I was thrilled that she found an activity to occupy her time, but soon her visits became more frequent, and she began spending evenings there instead of at home. She talked about the new gym instructor, Josh, with an enthusiasm that felt a bit off. Josh was charming and athletic, quickly becoming popular, especially among the women. I dismissed my feelings of unease, chalking it up to my long hours at the fire station making me overly sensitive. One evening, as Sarah was getting ready to head to the gym, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "You've been spending a lot of time at the gym lately," I remarked, trying to sound casual. Sarah paused, adjusting her hair in the mirror. "Yeah, it's a great way to relieve stress. Plus, Josh is an amazing instructor." I forced a smile. "I'm glad you were enjoying it. Just don't forget about us at home." She turned and kissed me on the cheek. "I would never forget about you and Emma. You two are my world." But her words didn't alleviate my growing unease. That night, after putting Emma to bed, I found myself staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. I had always trusted Sarah implicitly, but now, a seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing despite my efforts to ignore it. Jessica, ever the perceptive friend, pulled Sarah aside one afternoon at school. "Is everything okay with you and Mark?" she asked gently. "You seem a bit distant." Sarah sighed, looking away. "It's just stress, Jess. You know how it is." Jessica wasn't convinced. "Sarah, you can talk to me about anything. You know that, right?" Sarah forced a smile. "I know. Thanks, Jess. It is just a rough patch. We'll get through it." Despite Sarah's reassurances, Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. She decided to keep a closer eye on her friend, hoping to be there if Sarah needed her. The turning point came one weekend when I couldn't get time off work, and Sarah decided to take Emma to visit her mother, Linda. It was supposed to be a girls' weekend, a chance for them to bond while I caught up on work. On the surface, it seemed like a perfect plan, but as the weekend approached, Sarah seemed more eager than usual to get away. "I'm sorry you can come with us," she said, packing Emma's things. "It's okay," I replied, trying to sound upbeat. "You two have fun. I'll join you next time." Sarah gave me a quick hug. "We'll miss you." As they drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I tried to busy myself with work, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Sarah. That evening, while gearing up for a call, our dispatcher informed me of an emergency near the area where Sarah and Emma were staying. My heart skipped a beat. I grabbed my phone and saw a series of missed calls and texts from an unfamiliar number. The texts were from Sarah's friend, who had taken Emma ice skating. Emma had fallen and broken her wrist. They were at the emergency room, but no one could reach Sarah. Panic surged through me as I called the number back. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was shaky. "This is Mark, Emma's father. What happened? Where's Sarah?" "She went out to dinner with a friend," the woman replied hesitantly. "We've been trying to reach her, but her phone is off." My heart pounded in my chest. "A friend? Do you know who?" There was a long pause. "She's with a guy named Josh. I'm sorry, Mark." I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. I checked our family's shared location on my phone and saw that Sarah's phone was at a hotel. My worst fears were confirmed. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and confusion. When Sarah finally called me back, she was frantic. "Mark, I'm so sorry I didn't see the messages. I'm heading to the hospital now." "Save it," I said, my voice cold. "I know where you have been. We'll talk when you get back." The ride home was a blur. Sarah's betrayal was like a knife in my heart, and I knew our lives were about to change forever. As I drove home from the fire station that night, I couldn't shake the image of Sarah at the hotel with Josh. The betrayal was a heavy weight on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I felt like a fool for not seeing the signs earlier, for trusting her so completely. The familiar streets of our small town passed by in a blur as my mind raced with thoughts of what I would say to her when she got home. When I arrived home, the house was dark and quiet. Emma was already asleep, and I was grateful for that small mercy. I needed time to process everything without having to put on a brave face for her. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the clock, waiting for Sarah. Each tick of the second hand seemed to echo in the silence, amplifying my anxiety and anger. Finally, around midnight, I heard the sound of the car pulling into the driveway. My heart pounded as the front door opened, and Sarah stepped inside. She froze when she saw me sitting there, the guilt and fear evident in her eyes. "Mark," she began, her voice trembling. "I can explain." I held up a hand to stop her. "Save it, Sarah. I know where you were. I know you were with Josh." Her face paled, and she looked away. "It's not what you think," she whispered. "Not what I think," I echoed, my voice rising. "Emma was in the hospital and you were off with him. How could you do this to us?" Tears filled her eyes as she sank into a chair across from me. I didn't mean for it to happen, it just did." I slammed my fist on the table, making her jump. "That's not good enough, Sarah. We've been married for 10 years, we have a daughter. How could you throw it all away for him?" she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I was lonely, Mark. You were always working and I felt so alone. Josh was there and he made me feel wanted." Her words cut deep, but I couldn't let her see how much they hurt. "So what now?" I asked coldly. "Do you love him?" She shook her head vehemently. "No, it was a mistake. I love you, Mark. I never stopped loving you." I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. A mistake? This was more than just a mistake, Sarah. This was a choice to betray our family. She reached out to me, her eyes pleading. "Please, Mark, give me a chance to make things right. I'll do anything." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me. "You need to end it with Josh, completely, and we need to go to counseling. If we are going to have any chance of fixing this, we need help." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll do it. I'll end it with him, and I'll go to counseling. I just want us to be a family again." I wanted to believe her, but trust was something that would have to be rebuilt, if it could be rebuilt at all. "We'll see," I said quietly. "But right now, I need some space. I'm going to stay with Tom for a few days." She didn't protest, just nodded and wiped her tears. "I understand." As I packed a bag, my mind kept replaying the events of the evening, the shock, the anger, the pain. But there was also a small glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to heal from this, but it was going to be a long, difficult road, and I wasn't sure if we were strong enough to walk it together. When I arrived at Tom S.'s place, he was waiting for me with a beer in hand. "Rough night, huh?" he said, clapping me on the back. "You have no idea," I replied, taking the beer and sinking into his couch. Tom listened as I recounted the evening S events, his expression growing darker with each detail. Man, I knew something was off with her lately, but I never thought it would be this bad. "Neither did I said, feeling the weight of the situation settle over me once again. Tom sighed. "Well, you're welcome to stay here as long as you need. And if you need anything, you know I've got your back." "Thanks, Tom," I said, grateful for his support. "I just need some time to figure things out." As I lay in the guest room that night, staring at the ceiling, I felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, betrayal, but also a small flicker of hope. Sarah and I had a lot of work to do if we were going to salvage our marriage, but for Emma's sake, I had to try. The road ahead would be tough, but I was determined to see where it led. The morning light streamed through the thin curtains of Tom S.'s guest room, pulling me out of a restless sleep. The reality of the previous night hit me like a punch to the gut as I stared at the unfamiliar ceiling. I could hear Tom moving around in the kitchen, the clinking of dishes, a comforting reminder that I wasn't alone. I pulled myself out of bed and splashed some water on my face in the small bathroom. My reflection looked as haggard as I felt. Dark circles under my eyes and a deep frown etched into my forehead made me look older than my 36 years. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself before facing the day. Tom greeted me with a mug of coffee and a sympathetic smile. "Rough night?" he asked, though he didn't really need an answer. "You could say that," I replied, taking the mug gratefully. "I don't know what to do, Tom. I never saw this coming." He nodded, leaning against the kitchen counter. "You've been working so hard, man. It's no wonder things slipped through the cracks. But this is a whole other level." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I know. And now I've got to figure out how to move forward. For Emma's sake, if nothing else." Tom nodded. "You are a good dad, Mark, and a good man. Don't forget that." His words offered some comfort, but the path ahead still seemed daunting. I spent the day at Tom's, trying to gather my thoughts and decide on my next steps. By the evening, I knew I had to face Sarah again. We couldn't leave things unresolved, especially not with Emma involved. When I returned home, the house felt eerily quiet. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red from crying. She looked up as I walked in, her expression a mix of guilt and hope. "Mark," she began, her voice trembling, "I'm so sorry. I know I've hurt you, and I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." I nodded, sitting down across from her. "We need to talk. Really talk. About everything." She nodded, wiping away tears. "I ended it with Josh. Completely. I told him we could never see each other again, not even as friends." I felt a small measure of relief at her words, but there was still so much to address. "Good. That is a start. But we need to dig deeper, Sarah. We need to understand why this happened and how we can prevent it from happening again." She took a deep breath, looking me in the eyes. "I felt lonely, Mark. You were always working, and I felt like I didn't matter anymore. Josh was there, and he made me feel wanted. But it was a mistake. A terrible mistake." I listened, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I understand that you felt lonely, but turning to someone else wasn't the answer. We should have talked about it. We should have found a way to reconnect." She nodded, her eyes filled with regret. "I know. I realize that now. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild our marriage. Counseling, therapy, anything." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision before me. "We'll try counseling. But it's going to take time, Sarah. Trust doesn't come back overnight." She reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. "I know, and I am willing to put in the work. For us, for Emma." As difficult as the conversation was, it felt like a small step forward. We agreed to start seeing Reverend Parker for counseling and to make a conscious effort to communicate more openly. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. The next few weeks were a blur of counseling sessions and emotional conversations. Reverend Parker was a steady presence, guiding us through the process of rebuilding trust. He encouraged us to be honest with each other, to share our fears and insecurities. One evening, after a particularly intense session, Sarah and I sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the pine trees. The silence between us was comfortable, a sign that we were starting to heal. "I've been thinking," Sarah said softly, breaking the silence, "about why I did what I did. It wasn't just about feeling lonely. I think I was looking for something to fill a void in my life. I didn't realize how much I was missing until I found it with Josh." I nodded, appreciating her honesty. "I get that, and I need to take responsibility too. I have been so focused on work that I didn't see what was happening right in front of me." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and sadness. "Do you think we can really get through this?" I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I don't know, but I am willing to try. For Emma and for us." Our journey was far from over, but we were making progress. Each day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to rebuild our relationship. There were still moments of doubt and pain, but there was also hope. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, Sarah turned to me with a small smile. "Remember the night we first met? At that summer barbecue? I nodded, a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. Yeah, you were wearing that blue dress. I thought you were the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen. She laughed softly, a hint of the old sparkle returning to her eyes. I thought you were pretty handsome yourself. We danced under the stars, and I knew right then that I wanted to spend my life with you. I squeezed her hand, feeling a renewed sense of determination. We've been through a lot, Sarah. But we've still got a lot of good memories, and I think we can make more. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but as long as we were willing to walk it together, there was a chance for healing and renewal. The weeks following our initial decision to work on our marriage were fraught with tension and uncertainty. Despite our best efforts, the shadows of doubt and betrayal loomed large. Sarah and I attended counseling sessions with Reverend Parker, but the progress was slow and often painful. Each session peeled back layers of hurt and misunderstanding, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our relationship. One evening, as we were preparing dinner together, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken words. Sarah was chopping vegetables while I stirred a pot of soup, the silence between us growing more oppressive by the minute. I knew we needed to talk, but finding the right moment and words felt impossible. Finally, I set the spoon down and turned to her. Sarah, we need to address the elephant in the room. We can keep avoiding it. She paused, the knife hovering over the cutting board. I know. I've been dreading this conversation, but you're right. We need to talk. We moved to the kitchen table, the same place where we had confronted the reality of her affair. The weight of that moment hung in the air, and I could see the fear in her eyes. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why didn't you come to me when you started feeling lonely? Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair. I was afraid, Mark. Afraid that you wouldn't understand, that you'd think I was being selfish. You were always so busy with work, and I didn't want to add to your stress. I shook my head, frustration bubbling to the surface. But you did add to my stress. You turned to someone else instead of turning to me. How can I ever trust you again? Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't look away. I know I betrayed your trust, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But I am here now, and I am willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild what we've lost. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. We've made some progress, but it's not enough. I need more from you, Sarah. I need to know that you are fully committed to this marriage. She nodded, her expression earnest. I am, Mark. I am more committed than ever. I've cut off all contact with Josh, and I've quit the gym. I've even started looking for a new job, one that doesn't bring up those memories. Her words were reassuring, but the hurt ran deep. I appreciate that, but actions speak louder than words. It is going to take time, and I need you to be patient with me. I will be, she promised. I'll do whatever it takes, no matter how long it takes. The sincerity in her voice gave me a glimmer of hope, but the road ahead was still uncertain. We finished our dinner in relative silence, each of us lost in our thoughts. Later that evening, Jessica stopped by to check on us. She had been a constant support since the affair had come to light, offering a listening ear and practical advice. She and Sarah went out to the porch while I cleaned up the kitchen, giving them some privacy. Sarah, how are you holding up? Jessica asked, her concern evident. Sarah sighed, looking out at the darkening sky. It's been tough, Jess. Mark and I are making progress, but it is slow. I am trying to be patient, but I am scared that he'll never be able to forgive me. Jessica reached out, placing a hand on Sarah's arm. You have to give him time. This isn't something that can be fixed overnight. But if you are both committed, there's hope. Sarah nodded, her eyes filling with tears. I know. It's just hard to see him so hurt. I did that to him, and I don't know if I can ever make it right. Jessica squeezed her arm reassuringly. You can change the past, but you can work on the future. Just keep being honest and open with him. That's the only way forward. I joined them on the porch, and Jessica gave me a sympathetic smile. How are you holding up, Mark? I shrugged, feeling the weight of the past few weeks. It's been a roller coaster, but we are trying. That is all we can do, right? Jessica nodded. Absolutely. And remember, You are not alone. You have friends and family who care about you and want to see you both happy." As Jessica left, Sarah and I stood together on the porch, the silence between us no longer oppressive but filled with a tentative hope. We were taking small steps, but they were steps in the right direction. The next day, Tom stopped by the fire station to check on me. He had been a constant presence in my life, offering support and a bit of much-needed humor. "Hey, man," Tom said, clapping me on the back. "How are things going?" I sighed, leaning against the fire truck. "It's been tough, Tom. We're making progress, but it's slow. Some days I'm not sure if we'll ever get back to where we were." Tom nodded, his expression serious. "Rebuilding trust takes time. But you are a strong guy, Mark. If anyone can get through this, it is you." I appreciated his words, but the doubt still lingered. "I hope you're right. We've started counseling with Reverend Parker and it's helping, but it's going to be a long road." Tom gave me a reassuring smile. "One step at a time, buddy. And remember, you're not alone. You've got friends who've got your back." That evening, Sarah and I had our first joint session with Reverend Parker. The small room at the church was filled with a sense of calm and understanding. Reverend Parker, with his kind eyes and gentle demeanor, made us feel at ease despite the difficult conversation ahead. "Thank you both for being here," Reverend Parker began. "I know this is a challenging time for you, but the fact that you are willing to work on your marriage speaks volumes." Sarah and I nodded, holding hands for support. "We want to make this work," I said, my voice steady. "We are just not sure how to move forward." Reverend Parker smiled kindly. "That's perfectly understandable. Healing from a betrayal like this takes time and effort from both parties. The first step is to understand why it happened and to communicate openly about your feelings." Sarah took a deep breath. "I felt lonely, Reverend Parker. Mark was always working, and I didn't know how to reach out to him. Josh was there, and I made a terrible mistake." Reverend Parker nodded. "Thank you for your honesty, Sarah. It's important to acknowledge those feelings. Mark, how do you feel about what Sarah just shared?" I looked at Sarah, feeling a mixture of sadness and hope. I understand why she felt lonely, but it still hurts. I want to trust her again, but it is hard. Reverend Parker leaned forward, his expression compassionate. "Trust is the foundation of any relationship, and rebuilding it takes time. It is important to communicate openly and to be patient with each other. There will be setbacks, but if you are both committed, you can move forward." The session continued with us sharing our fears, hopes, and doubts. It was an emotionally draining but necessary step in our healing process. By the end of the session, I felt a small sense of relief. We were starting to make progress, one step at a time. As we walked out of the church, Sarah looked at me with a small smile. "Thank you for being willing to do this, Mark. It means a lot to me." I squeezed her hand, feeling a flicker of hope. "We are in this together, Sarah. It's not going to be easy, but I'm willing to try." The weeks that followed were filled with more counseling sessions, emotional conversations, and small steps toward healing. There were still moments of doubt and pain, but there was also hope. We were rebuilding our marriage, one day at a time, and while the road ahead was uncertain, we were committed to walking it together. One evening, after a particularly intense counseling session, Sarah and I sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the pine trees. The silence between us was no longer oppressive, but filled with a tentative hope. "Remember the night we first met?" Sarah asked, breaking the silence. "At that summer barbecue?" I nodded, a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "Yeah, you were wearing that blue dress. I thought you were the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen." She laughed softly, a hint of the old sparkle returning to her eyes. "I thought you were pretty handsome yourself. We danced under the stars, and I knew right then that I wanted to spend my life with you." I squeezed her hand, feeling a renewed sense of determination. "We've been through a lot, Sarah, but we've still got a lot of good memories, and I think we can make more." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but as long as we were willing to walk it together, there was a chance for healing and renewal. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Sarah and I continued to attend counseling sessions with Reverend Parker, but the emotional toll of the affair lingered. Every day was a battle to rebuild the trust that had been shattered, and every small victory felt hard won. One afternoon, while I was at the fire station, I found myself staring out the window, lost in thought. The usual hustle and bustle of the station seemed distant, as my mind wandered back to the night I discovered Sarah's betrayal. The pain was still fresh, but there was also a growing determination to move forward. Tom walked over, snapping me out of my reverie. "Hey, Mark, you okay?" I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Just thinking, Tom. It's been a rough few months." He nodded, his expression sympathetic. "I can imagine. How are things with Sarah?" I hesitated, then decided to be honest. "We are making progress, but it's slow. Some days are better than others, but the doubt is always there." Tom leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "You know, it's normal to feel that way. Trust takes time to rebuild. The important thing is that you are both committed to making it work." I nodded, appreciating his support. "Yeah, you are right. It's just hard to stay positive sometimes." He clapped me on the back. "You're doing your best, Mark. That is all anyone can ask for. And remember, you are not alone in this. You've got friends who care about you." I smiled, feeling a bit lighter. "Thanks, Tom. I needed that." That evening, I returned home to find Sarah and Emma playing a board game at the kitchen table. The sight of them laughing and enjoying each other's company warmed my heart. It was moments like these that reminded me why I was fighting so hard to save our marriage. "Hey, Dad!" Emma called out, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Want to join us?" I smiled, setting my bag down. "Sure, what are we playing?" "Monopoly," she replied excitedly. "Mom is winning, but I think I can catch up." I sat down with them, feeling a sense of normalcy that had been missing for so long. As we played, Sarah and I exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between us. We were in this together, and we would find a way through it. Later that night, after Emma was tucked into bed, Sarah and I sat on the couch, enjoying a rare moment of quiet. She looked at me, her expression serious. "Mark, I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened. I know I've said it before, but I truly am sorry for what I did." I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I know, Sarah, and I appreciate that. It is just going to take time for me to fully trust you again." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I understand, and I am willing to wait as long as it takes. I love you, Mark, and I don't want to lose you." I pulled her into a hug, holding her tightly. "I love you too, Sarah, and we're going to get through this, together." As the weeks passed, our relationship slowly began to mend. There were still moments of doubt and insecurity, but there were also moments of hope and connection. We made a conscious effort to spend more time together as a family, going on outings and planning activities that brought us closer. One weekend, we decided to take a trip to the nearby lake, a place we had often visited before the affair. The weather was perfect, with clear skies and a gentle breeze. We packed a picnic and spent the day swimming, playing games, and simply enjoying each other's company. As the sun began to set, we sat on a blanket, watching the sky turn shades of pink and orange. Emma was chasing fireflies nearby, her laughter filling the air. "This is nice," Sarah said softly, leaning against me. "I missed this." I nodded, wrapping an arm around her. "Me too. It's good to feel like a family again." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you for giving me a second chance, Mark. I know it hasn't been easy, but I promise you, I'm committed to making this work." I smiled, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. "I know you are, Sarah, and I am committed too. We're going to be okay." As we watched the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a renewed sense of hope. The road ahead was still uncertain, but we were walking it together, one step at a time. However, the journey was not without its challenges. There were days when the memories of Sarah's betrayal would resurface, bringing with them a wave of anger and sadness. On those days, I struggled to keep my emotions in check, often retreating into myself. One such day, I found myself at the fire station, unable to focus on my work. I retreated to the quiet of the break room, staring blankly at the wall. Tom found me there, concern etched on his face. "Mark, what is going on?" he asked, sitting down next to me. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Just a rough day, Tom. The memories. They hit me out of nowhere sometimes. He nodded, understanding. That's normal, you know. Healing isn't a straight line. There will be ups and downs. But you've got to keep pushing through. I looked at him, appreciating his wisdom. How do you do it, Tom? How do you stay so positive? He smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. I have had my own battles, Mark. We all have. But I try to focus on the good things, the things worth fighting for, and you've got a lot worth fighting for. His words resonated with me, and I felt a renewed determination to keep moving forward. That evening, when I returned home, I found Sarah in the living room, reading a book. She looked up, her face lighting up when she saw me. Hey, she said softly. How was your day? I sat down next to her, taking her hand. It was tough, but I am here now, and that's what matters. She smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. I'm glad you are here. I missed you. We sat in comfortable silence, the weight of the day lifting as we simply enjoyed being together. It was moments like these that reminded me why I was fighting so hard to save our marriage. As the months continued to pass, Sarah and I began to find a new rhythm. Our counseling sessions with Reverend Parker were becoming less about the affair and more about building a stronger foundation for our future. We learned to communicate better, to share our fears and insecurities without judgment. One evening, after a particularly enlightening session, we decided to go for a walk. The air was crisp, and the stars were beginning to twinkle in the night sky. Do you remember our first date? Sarah asked, breaking the silence. I chuckled, nodding. How could I forget? We went to that little Italian restaurant and you spilled your wine all over the table. She laughed, a genuine sound that warmed my heart. I was so nervous, but you were so sweet about it, made me feel at ease. I smiled, pulling her closer. I knew from that moment that you were special, Sarah, and despite everything we've been through, I still believe that. She looked up at me, her eyes shining with emotion. Thank you, Mark, for believing in us, for giving us a second chance. I kissed her forehead, feeling a sense of contentment. We are in this together, Sarah, and I have faith that we'll come out stronger on the other side. As we walked back home, hand in hand, I felt a renewed sense of hope. The journey had been difficult, filled with pain and doubt, but it had also been a journey of growth and healing. We were building a new future together, one filled with love, trust, and understanding. The road ahead was still uncertain, but as long as we were willing to walk it together, I knew we could face whatever challenges came our way. We were a family, and that was worth fighting for. The chill of autumn settled over our small town, painting the trees in hues of red, orange, and yellow. The changing seasons mirrored the transformation happening within our family. As Sarah and I continued our journey towards healing, the decision on how to move forward loomed large. Our counseling sessions with Reverend Parker had been instrumental in helping us navigate our emotions and rebuild our connection. But there was still a lingering uncertainty about what the future held for us. One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, Sarah broached the subject that had been on both of our minds. Mark, she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. We've come a long way, but I think it is time we make a decision about our future. We can't keep living in limbo. I nodded, understanding the weight of her words. You're right. We need to decide whether we're going to fully commit to rebuilding our marriage or go our separate ways. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she held my gaze. I want to rebuild, Mark. I want to make this work more than anything. But I need to know that you are truly with me, that you believe we can get through this. I reached out, taking her hands in mine. I do believe that, Sarah. It's been a difficult journey, but I've seen the changes in you, in us. I believe we can come out of this stronger. She smiled through her tears, a look of relief washing over her face. Thank you, Mark. I promise you I am all in. I'll do whatever it takes to make this work. With our decision made, we felt a renewed sense of purpose. We threw ourselves into our counseling sessions with even more dedication, determined to address the underlying issues that had led to the affair. Reverend Parker continued to guide us, helping us to communicate more openly and honestly. One afternoon, we had a breakthrough session that felt like a turning point. Reverend Parker asked us to reflect on what we had learned about ourselves and each other through this process. "Mark," he said, looking at me with his kind eyes, "what have you discovered about yourself during this time?" I took a deep breath, thinking carefully about my response. "I've learned that I need to be more present, not just physically, but emotionally. I realized that I had been so focused on providing for my family that I neglected the emotional connection with Sarah. I need to find a balance between my work and my family life." Reverend Parker nodded, then turned to Sarah. "And you, Sarah? What have you learned?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with love and determination. "I've learned that I can rely on someone else to fill the void inside me. I need to be open and honest about my feelings and not be afraid to ask for help. I also realized how much I love Mark and how much I want to make our marriage work." Reverend Parker smiled, clearly pleased with our progress. "It's clear that you both have grown a lot through this process. The key to moving forward is to continue nurturing that growth and to keep communicating openly." As we left the church that day, Sarah and I felt a sense of optimism that had been missing for so long. We decided to take a weekend trip, just the two of us, to reconnect and celebrate our progress. We chose a cozy cabin by the lake, a place where we had spent many happy moments in the past. The drive there was filled with laughter and lighthearted conversation, a stark contrast to the tension that had plagued us for so long. The first evening at the cabin, we sat by the fire, sharing a bottle of wine and reminiscing about the early days of our relationship. "Do you remember our first trip here?" Sarah asked, her eyes twinkling with fond memories. I nodded, a smile spreading across my face. "Of course I do. We were so young and carefree. We spent the entire weekend exploring the woods and swimming in the lake." She laughed, the sound filling the cabin with warmth. "I remember you trying to impress me by catching a fish with your bare hands." I chuckled, shaking my head, and failing miserably. "But you were kind enough to pretend to be impressed." Sarah leaned closer, her expression serious but tender. "Those were some of the best times of my life, Mark, and I want us to have more of those moments. I want us to create new memories and build a future together." I looked into her eyes, feeling the sincerity of her words. "I want that too, Sarah. I believe we can have that. We've come a long way, and I am committed to making sure we keep moving forward." The weekend was a time of healing and renewal. We talked about our hopes and dreams for the future, shared our fears and insecurities, and made promises to each other. It felt like a fresh start, a chance to rebuild our relationship on a stronger foundation. When we returned home, we felt more connected than ever. We continued our counseling sessions, but there was a newfound sense of confidence in our ability to overcome the challenges ahead. One evening, as we were preparing dinner, Sarah turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Mark, I've been thinking, maybe we should renew our vows. It could be a way to symbolize our commitment to each other and to mark this new beginning." I smiled, feeling a surge of warmth at the idea. "I think that's a great idea, Sarah. It would be a way to celebrate how far we've come and to look forward to the future." We began planning the vow renewal ceremony, deciding to keep it small and intimate. We chose a beautiful spot among the pine trees, a place that held special meaning for us. We invited close friends and family, including Jessica, Tom, Linda, Brian, Principal Evans, Reverend Parker, and even Megan, who had found her own path to healing. The day of the ceremony arrived, and the weather was perfect. The sun shone brightly, casting a warm glow over the gathering. As I stood there waiting for Sarah to walk down the makeshift aisle, I felt a sense of peace and gratitude. When Sarah appeared, wearing a simple but elegant dress, my heart swelled with emotion. She looked radiant, her eyes filled with love and determination. As she walked towards me, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey we had taken to get to this moment. Reverend Parker led the ceremony, his words filled with wisdom and encouragement. Today, we celebrate the renewal of Mark and Sarah's vows. They have faced challenges and heartache, but they have chosen to rebuild their relationship with love, trust, and commitment. May this ceremony be a testament to their strength and dedication. As Sarah and I exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through all of life's ups and downs. I felt a profound sense of connection. We were not the same people we had been before the affair, but we were stronger and more resilient. We had learned from our mistakes and were committed to building a future together. After the ceremony, we celebrated with our friends and family, enjoying a meal filled with laughter and joy. As the evening drew to a close, I took a moment to reflect on the journey we had taken. The road had been difficult, filled with pain and doubt, but it had also been a journey of growth and healing. We had learned to communicate better, to support each other, and to cherish the moments of joy and connection. As I looked at Sarah, laughing with our friends, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. We had faced the storm and come out stronger on the other side, and as we stood together among the pine trees, I knew that we were ready to face whatever challenges the future held. We were a family, and that was worth fighting for. The vow renewal ceremony marked a significant turning point in our lives. It was a declaration of our commitment to each other, and a symbol of the strength we had found through adversity. However, the journey was far from over. Life continued to present its challenges, and we faced them together, fortified by the promise we had made to one another. In the weeks that followed, we settled into a new routine. Our communication had improved significantly, and we made it a point to spend quality time together as a family. Emma thrived in the renewed atmosphere of love and stability, her laughter filling the house with a joy that had been missing for so long. One evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Sarah and I sat on the porch, enjoying the cool night air. The stars were bright in the sky, and the sound of crickets created a soothing backdrop to our conversation. "Mark," Sarah began, her voice soft and contemplative, "I have been thinking a lot about everything we have been through. I feel like I've learned so much about myself, about us." I nodded, taking her hand in mine. "I feel the same way. It's been a difficult journey, but I think we have come out stronger because of it." She looked at me, her eyes filled with emotion. "Do you ever wonder what our lives would have been like if none of this had happened? If we had just continued on, oblivious to the problems beneath the surface?" I thought for a moment, then shook my head. I used to, but now I realize that every experience, good or bad, has shaped who we are today. We've learned to appreciate each other more, to communicate better. I wouldn't change that for anything. Sarah smiled, a look of understanding passing between us. "You're right, and I'm grateful for the second chance we've been given. I'm grateful for you, for Emma, for our family." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, simply enjoying the moment. The air was filled with the scent of pine and the promise of new beginnings. As the months continued to pass, we found ourselves growing even closer. We made a point to keep our lives balanced, ensuring that work never took precedence over our family. I cut back on my hours at the fire station, prioritizing time with Sarah and Emma. Sarah, too, found a new job that allowed her to be more present at home, and she thrived in her new role. One afternoon, while we were having a family picnic by the lake, Emma looked up at us with a thoughtful expression. "Mom, Dad, can we talk about what happened last year? I know things were really hard for a while, but now everything seems better." Sarah and I exchanged a glance, then nodded. "Of course, sweetheart," I said gently. "What do you want to know?" Emma took a deep breath, her young face serious. "I just want to understand why everything happened. Why were you both so sad?" Sarah reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Emma's face. "Sometimes, even when people love each other very much, they can make mistakes. But what is important is that we worked hard to fix those mistakes and to make our family strong again." Emma nodded, seeming to process her mother's words. "I'm glad you did. I love our family, and I am happy that we are all together." I smiled, feeling a surge of pride and love for our daughter. "We are happy too, Emma, and we promise to always work hard to keep our family strong and happy." The conversation with Emma was a reminder of how far we had come and the importance of being honest and open with each other. It reinforced our commitment to maintaining the new foundation we had built. As the seasons changed, so did we. Our lives were no longer overshadowed by the pain of the past. Instead, we focused on the present and the future, cherishing the moments of joy and connection that defined our family. One evening, we hosted a small dinner party with our closest friends and family. Jessica and Tom were there, along with Linda, Brian, Principal Evans, Reverend Parker, and even Megan. The house was filled with laughter and conversation, a testament to the support and love that had helped us through our darkest times. As we sat around the table, sharing stories and enjoying each other's company, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. These were the people who had stood by us, who had believed in us even when we struggled to believe in ourselves. Jessica raised her glass, a smile on her face. Here's to Mark and Sarah. You've shown us all what it means to fight for what's important, to never give up on love and family. We are all so proud of you. There was a chorus of cheers, and I felt my eyes misting over with emotion. Sarah squeezed my hand, and I looked at her, feeling a connection that was stronger than ever. Thank you, I said, my voice filled with sincerity. We couldn't have done it without all of you. Your support means the world to us. As the evening drew to a close, I took a moment to reflect on the journey we had taken. It had been filled with challenges and heartache, but it had also been a journey of growth, love, and healing. We had learned to communicate better, to appreciate each other, and to build a future filled with hope and promise. Later that night, as Sarah and I lay in bed, she turned to me, her eyes shining with happiness. Mark, do you think we've really made it? Do you think we are finally past everything? I smiled, brushing a kiss across her forehead. I think we've come a long way, Sarah. We've faced our demons and come out stronger. There will always be challenges, but as long as we face them together, I know we can handle anything. She snuggled closer, her warmth and love filling me with a sense of contentment. I love you, Mark. Thank you for believing in us. I love you too, Sarah, and I always will. We are a team, now and forever. As we drifted off to sleep, I felt a profound sense of peace. Our journey was far from over, but we were no longer defined by the mistakes of the past. We were a family, united by love and strengthened by the challenges we had overcome. In the months and years that followed, we continued to build our lives together, creating new memories and facing new challenges with the same determination and love that had brought us through our darkest days. Our story was one of resilience and hope, a testament to the power of love and the strength of the human spirit. And as we looked towards the future, we did so with the knowledge that no matter what came our way, we would face it together as a family. Thank you for listening to this story. Subscribe to my channel, put a like under the video, and write a comment about how you like this story and what stories you want to hear.